In the far edge of the Milky Way there was a small planet called Verena. It was once bright with forests, cities, and peaceful life. But after the great meteor storm, nothing was the same. The sky turned red, the oceans boiled, and thousands of lives vanished within hours. The survivors built small camps among the ruins. Their faces covered with dust and their hopes slowly fading away, they sent distress calls to the Galactic Union, begging for help. At first they believed the Union would come, because the Union always promised that no world would be left behind. But weeks passed and no one came. Then the message arrived, and short and cold. Verena is beyond recovery. All rescue missions canceled. It was like hearing their death sentence spoken by the stars themselves. Among the survivors was a small child named Rima, sitting near the wreck of an old shuttle. Staring at the sky, her father told her, the stars used to mean hope, but now they only looked like silent eyes watching them die. Food ran out, the air grew thin, and the temperature dropped every night. People stopped counting days, they only waited. No one dared to speak about the truth, that they had been abandoned. Far away across the silent void, the UHS Resolute, an old Terran warship, drifted near a gas giant. Its captain, Ilara Kane, read the reports from the Union communication network. When she saw the code Verena, rescue denied, she froze. Her crew waited for her command. They knew she was thinking something dangerous. Disobeying Union orders was a crime, punishable by exile or worse. Ilara closed her eyes, remembering Earth's own history, the times when humans were small, weak, and left alone by stronger powers. Humanity had learned to survive not because others saved them, but because they refused to surrender. She looked at her crew and said quietly, "We don't leave people to die." Her words spread through the ship like fire in dry grass. Every officer understood what it meant. The Resolute was going to Verena. Against direct orders, no backup, no allies, just them. The engineers started preparing the jump drives. The pilots checked the navigation routes, avoiding Union patrols in the lower decks. Soldiers whispered about the mission. Some were afraid, some proud. But one thing united them. They all believed in the idea of humanity standing up for those left behind. When the Resolute entered hyperspace, silence filled the bridge. The stars stretched into long lines, and for a moment, the crew could almost hear the heartbeat of the galaxy. A young officer, Lieutenant Harris, turned to Ilara and said, "Captain, the Union will come after us," Ilara replied, without looking away from the stars. "Let them. Someone has to remind them what courage looks like." Meanwhile, on Verena, the survivors had built a signal tower from broken metal and old solar panels. Rima's father climbed it every day, trying to boost the signal. Each transmission drained the last bit of power they had left. But he still whispered into the microphone, "To anyone listening, please. There are still lives here." No one answered, until one night a faint signal came through. A human voice. "This is Captain Ilara Kane of the UHS Resolute. Hold on, we're coming." The entire camp went silent, their eyes wide. Some started crying, others laughing in disbelief. Rima asked her father, "Are they real?" He smiled weakly. "They're human, they don't lie." When the Resolute exited hyperspace near the red sun of Verena, the planet looked broken. Half of it was burned black, the other half covered in storms. Union warning beacons surrounded the orbit, flashing red, warning any ship to stay away. Ilara ignored them. Her ship's scanners detected hundreds of weak life signs below. She ordered the crew, "Prepare rescue pods. We land in 10 minutes." As the ship descended, lightning tore across the clouds and the metal hull shook violently. Rima's camp saw a bright light cutting through the storm. For the first time in months, they saw hope falling from the sky. The ship landed near the ruins, its ramp opening slowly. Humans stepped out in armored suits, their visors glowing blue in the red dust. The survivors gathered around, weak but smiling. Ilara looked at them and whispered, "You're safe now." But above the clouds, the Union satellites recorded everything. Within minutes, messages rushed across the galactic network. Human ship disobeying orders. Unauthorized landing detected. Prepare enforcement fleet. The Union Council sat in their shining hall of glass and gold. Their faces cold and unreadable, one of them said. "The humans have crossed the line." Back on Verena, the Resolute's crew began setting up medical tents and air filters. Rima watched them work, her small hands clutching a broken piece of her old toy spaceship. She whispered to herself, "The humans came." In that moment, Hope returned to a dying world. But Alara knew this was only the beginning. Because when humanity defies the galaxy always strikes back, and somewhere in the darkness, 20 Union ships were already on their way, their weapons armed, their orders clear. Stop the humans, at any cost. The morning sky of Verena glowed red and silver as the UHS Resolute stood proudly on the broken plains. Its engines were still warm from the dangerous descent, and the ground trembled softly beneath its landing gear. Around the ship, humans moved quickly, building shelters, deploying medical drones, and checking oxygen levels. The survivors of Verena watched in silence, some afraid, some in awe. They had never seen humans before, but now these strangers were their only hope. Captain Alara Kane walked among the camps, her armor covered in dust. Her face tired but calm. Everywhere she looked, she saw pain, starving children, sick elders, and bodies wrapped in silver cloths, yet, behind those tired eyes, she also saw something else, gratitude and the spark of hope returning. She placed her hand on a child's shoulder and whispered, "You're safe now, little one. We're going to fix this." But deep inside, Alara knew safety was an illusion, because the Union would not stay silent for long back in orbit. The Resolute's communication officer shouted from the bridge, "Incoming transmission, priority red, Galactic Union command frequency." Alara climbed the ramp, returning to the bridge as the hologram of the Union Admiral Varric appeared before her. He was tall, with golden skin and eyes like glass, his voice sharp as metal. "Captain Alara Kane, by order of the Galactic Union Council, you are to cease operations and withdraw immediately." Alara kept her voice calm. "There are survivors here, Admiral. We can't just leave them." Varric's expression didn't change. "Verena is a restricted world. Any interference violates Union Code 47A. Turn back now, or your ship will be classified as a rogue vessel." The bridge fell silent, every crew member watching their captain. Alara slowly removed her gloves and said, "If saving lives makes us rogues, then so be it." Varric's eyes narrowed. "You defy the Union?" Alara answered quietly. "No, Admiral, I defend what it once stood for." The hologram flickered and vanished, leaving only the echo of static in the air. Outside, the storm thickened, and far above, hidden behind the clouds, Union satellites watched every movement of the human ship. Lieutenant Harris turned to Alara, nervous. "Ma'am." "They'll send ships," Alara nodded. "I know. That's why we work fast." She ordered her crew to begin Operation Haven, a plan to evacuate as many survivors as possible before the Union fleet arrived. Shuttles began flying between the camps and the ship, lifting wounded refugees to safety. The humans worked through lightning and acid rain, their armor scorched but their hearts steady. Meanwhile, deep in the ship's engineering bay, a man named Kellen, the communications officer, stared at a blinking light on his console. It was the Union frequency, and a message flashed across the screen. "Report human position for amnesty." Kellen hesitated, fear tightening his chest. He had a family back on Luna Station, and the thought of losing them haunted him. He whispered to himself, "Maybe the Union won't actually attack." But when he looked at the faces of the rescued aliens, the crying children, the humans giving away their rations, he turned the console off. "Not today," he muttered down on the surface. Alara supervised the final shuttle run. She watched her people carry wounded survivors into the cargo bay. Every second precious. Suddenly the sky flashed white. Sensors screamed on the bridge. "Multiple FTL signatures detected," Harris shouted. Alara looked up through the dust, her heart sinking. 20 bright streaks of light appeared in the sky, Union warships dropping out of hyperspace, forming a blockade around the planet. "They're here," she said quietly. The Union fleet broadcast a message across all frequencies. "To the Terran vessel Resolute, you are in violation of galactic law. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." The humans on the ground froze, staring at the sky as the clouds burned from the heat of incoming ships. Alara stood on the ramp, the wind whipping through her hair. Her voice calm, "Get everyone inside. Seal the bays." Harris turned to her. "Captain, if we fight, we won't win," Alara replied. "Maybe not. But history will remember what we did." Inside the ship, the refugees held hands, whispering prayers in different languages. The hull shook as the Resolute lifted off. Engines roaring, Alara took the command chair, her voice echoing through the intercom. "This is Captain Alara Kane. Humanity does not abandon the weak if you stand with us. Hold the line. The crew cheered, their fear replaced by fierce determination. The ship climbed through the thick atmosphere, heading straight toward the approaching fleet. Admiral Varick's voice filled the speakers again, colder than before. Last warning, Captain. Stand down. Ilara's eyes blazed. You gave your warning, Admiral. Now here's ours. She raised her hand and said softly, activate the shield grid. Blue light rippled across the ship as energy barriers came online. The first Union plasma round struck. Exploding against the shields with a thunderous flash, the battle had begun. And yet in that moment Ilara smiled faintly. Because she knew something the Union didn't. Her ship wasn't just fighting for Verena. It was fighting for every forgotten soul the galaxy had thrown away. The red sky above Verena cracked with lightning as the first Union ships descended through the storm. Their massive hulls glowed with white light, their weapons charging, their voices echoing through every open channel. Terran vessel Resolute, you are ordered to stand down. But on the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Ilara Kane stood calm, her hands behind her back, her eyes fixed on the screen. She could see 20 Union destroyers forming a ring around the planet, blocking all escape routes. Lieutenant Harris spoke in a trembling voice. Captain, we are outnumbered, outgunned, and low on power. Ilara turned to him with a quiet smile. Then we'll have to make every shot count. Around her, the crew moved quickly. Engineers rerouted power to shields, pilots prepared countermeasures, and the ship's AI locked onto enemy targeting systems. The tension was heavy, but it was not fear. It was resolve. Down on the surface, small groups of humans were still rescuing the last survivors. They could see the Union ships in the sky, bright and deadly like false suns. Sergeant Vale, leading the ground team, shouted through the radio, Captain, last group is boarding, we're ready for extraction. Ilara's reply came calm and steady. Understood, bring them home. Then the first plasma blast hit. The entire ship shook, alarms screamed. Sparks rained from the ceiling, but the shields held, glowing blue against the firestorm. Harris shouted, direct hit on the port side. Shields down to 60%. Ilara gripped the railing, her voice cold and clear. Return fire. The Resolute's cannons roared, blue energy streaking across the sky, cutting through the clouds and striking one of the Union destroyers. The enemy ship spun out of formation, burning as explosions ripped through its hull. For the first time in centuries, a Union vessel fell to a human shot. The galaxy was watching, hundreds of outposts and ships listening to the live feed, shocked that the youngest species dared to fight the old powers. Admiral Varick appeared again on the main screen, his voice sharp with fury. You are sealing your own fate. Human, Ilara replied without hesitation. Maybe, but at least it will mean something. She ordered her ship closer to the atmosphere, forcing the Union fleet to chase her into the storm where scanners and targeting systems failed. Lightning crackled across the hull as the battle turned into chaos. The Resolute weaved between wreckage and falling debris, firing precision bursts that hit weak spots the Union never thought humans could find. In the chaos, something strange began to happen. Several alien ships from nearby systems tuned into the fight, their crews silent as they watched the humans defend a dying world that was not their own. On one small freighter, a young alien whispered, "They're fighting for strangers. Who does that?" His captain replied softly, "Humans do, back in orbit." The Union fleet regrouped, forming a triangle formation, preparing to overwhelm the humans with sheer numbers. Harris turned to Ilara, panic rising in his voice. "We can't hold much longer. Shields are at 20%. Ilara stared at the tactical map, then whispered, "Prepare the stealth pods." The crew looked at her in confusion. "Ma'am, you mean—" "Yes," she nodded. "We're taking the fight to them." Dozens of small pods launched from the ship, vanishing into the storm. Each carried 2 soldiers and an EMP charge. They drifted silently toward the Union ships, invisible to sensors. Minutes later, flashes of light rippled through the fleet as systems failed. Weapons went dark and chaos spread among the enemy ranks. Ilara used the moment. "Now! All cannons fire!" The Resolute unleashed everything it had. The nearest Union cruiser exploded, breaking apart in a blinding flash. For a few seconds, the humans had the upper hand. But victory came with a price. The Resolute's engines overheated. The reactor warning lights turned red and power began to fail. Harris shouted, "Main drive offline! We're losing altitude!" Ilara's voice remained steady. "Stabilize her, we can't die yet." She looked out the viewport, watching the glowing remains of Union ships burning like falling stars. This is what defiance looks like, she whispered. Suddenly, a massive Union flagship appeared, 10 times larger than the Resolute, armed with heavy plasma batteries. It opened fire, one blast after another, hammering the human ship. The shields shattered, the hull cracked, and the bridge filled with smoke. Crew members were thrown to the floor. Alarms blaring everywhere, Alara stood covered in blood and dust, her voice hoarse but unbroken. Don't give up. Not while they're still watching. In the chaos, the communication officer shouted, "Captain! We're receiving transmission requests from across the galaxy. Civilians, traitors, even soldiers, they're watching us." Alara smiled faintly. "Then let's show them what it means to be human." She turned to Harris. "Prepare the beacon." Harris froze. "The beacon, ma'am? That's forbidden tech." "So is Mercy." "Apparently," she replied. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were blazing with fire. As the ship trembled under another hit, she spoke into the intercom. "All hands brace for impact. And remember, we fight not for orders, but for what's right." Outside, the Union flagship charged its final weapon. Preparing to end it all, Alara looked toward the planet below, where the rescued survivors watched the battle unfold. She whispered, "At least they'll know we tried," and then, with one last surge of power, the UHS Resolute vanished into the storm. The galaxy would never forget the light that burned that day. The day humanity stood alone and refused to kneel, smoke filled the corridors of the UHS Resolute. The lights flickered, sparks fell like burning rain, and the sound of alarms mixed with the deep groan of metal under pressure. The ship had taken heavy damage, half the systems were offline, and the crew worked in near darkness outside. The Union fleet surrounded them like wolves closing in on their prey. The flagship's massive cannons glowed. Charging for the final shot, Captain Alara Kane stood on the bridge, covered in ash and blood, her uniform torn. Her hands gripped the railing as she watched the enemy fleet through the cracked viewport. Lieutenant Harris ran to her side, shouting over the noise, "Captain, hull integrity is at 30%, we can't take another hit." Alara didn't answer immediately, her eyes fixed on the planet below. The refugees they had saved were watching. If the Union destroyed the ship now, the story of what they did would die with them. Then she said quietly, "Activate the beacon." Harris froze. "Captain, the beacon isn't meant for use during combat. It could overload the reactor." Alara turned to him, her eyes filled with calm fire. "If the galaxy wants to silence us, then let them hear our last words." The crew obeyed. In the communication bay, engineers worked fast, rerouting power to the beacon, a giant sphere deep within the ship's core. It was old human technology, a forbidden prototype capable of broadcasting across the entire galactic network. As it powered up, the ship trembled, the lights dimmed, and the hum of energy filled the air like a heartbeat. Outside, the Union fleet prepared for the final strike, their commanders giving the order, "Fire when ready." But before the shot could launch, a voice broke across every frequency, a woman's voice, calm and strong, echoing through every ship, every station, every world. "This is Captain Alara Kane of the Terran vessel Resolute. We found a world left to die, a people abandoned by the Union's cold logic. They said it was beyond saving. We disagreed." Every listener stopped. From mining colonies to royal halls, from merchant ships to slave camps, all fell silent. Alara's words carried not only through space, but through hearts. "You talk about unity, about order, yet you choose who deserves to live. We may be human, young and small among your ancient stars, but we remember what it means to care. We remember what it means to fight for the helpless." On the Union flagship, Admiral Varric stood frozen, his golden eyes narrowing in fury. "Cut the transmission," he ordered. But his officers shook their heads. "It's not possible, sir. It's broadcasting through quantum relays across the entire network." Alara's voice continued, reaching planets that had never even heard of humanity. "You left them to die, we did not. If this is rebellion, then let history record our defiance." On distant worlds, alien workers stopped their labor to listen in hidden prisons. Slaves whispered the name humans on backwater moons. Small children looked up at the stars and dreamed of freedom. The beacon turned the Resolute's final stand into a message of hope. And the galaxy, for the first time, began to question its own silence. Inside the ship, the reactor began to overheat. Warning lights flashed red, and Harris shouted, "Captain, we're burning out." "We can't hold it." Alara placed her hand on his shoulder. "Then we burn bright enough to be remembered." The beacon reached full power, its light filling the ship, shining through every crack and window like a small sun. Admiral Varric, desperate, gave the final command. Fire! The Union fleet unleashed everything: beams, missiles, plasma fire. The space around Verena turned white with explosions. When the light faded, nothing remained of the Resolute. Only a drifting field of debris glowing softly against the dark. But the signal didn't stop. Even after the ship was gone, the beacon kept transmitting, powered by the last surge of human energy, its message repeating endlessly across the stars. "You left them to die, we did not." In the days that followed, chaos spread through the Union worlds. Protests broke out, citizens demanding answers, soldiers questioning orders. The Council tried to suppress the broadcast, but it was too late. Copies of the message existed on thousands of systems. The image of the burning human ship became a symbol, the light of defiance, and somewhere in deep space near a forgotten relay station, a faint signal pulsed again. It was weak, but it carried one final encrypted message from Alara herself. "We are not gone. We are humanity, and we stand with those you cast aside." The galaxy had never seen anything like it. A single ship had defied an empire, and though it was destroyed, it had ignited something far greater. For the first time, the Union feared not human weapons, but human compassion, and in that fear a new age began, the age of defiance. Days turned into weeks after the destruction of the UHS Resolute. The Galactic Union tried to erase what happened, deleting records, silencing reporters, and shutting down any transmission of the beacon message. But it was too late. The signal had spread beyond their control. On hundreds of worlds, on every frequency, the same voice echoed again and again. "You left them to die." "We did not." The people began to whisper the name humanity. To some it was a name of rebellion. To others it was hope on mining colonies. Workers painted the symbol of the Resolute, a burning star wrapped in wings. On slave worlds, guards found slogans carved into walls. "Remember the humans." The Union Council met in secret chambers, their faces cold with fear. They had ruled for centuries, and no one had ever dared to defy them. But now their control was cracking. Not from war, but from an idea, far from the center of power. On a hidden world lit by twin suns, a new colony thrived. It was called New Dawn here. The survivors of Verena lived under human protection. Engineers, farmers, and doctors, both human and alien, worked together to rebuild what the galaxy had tried to destroy. Children from different races played together under the open sky, their laughter echoing where silence once ruled. And every morning, a flag bearing the symbol of the Resolute waved gently in the wind. Captain Alara Kane was gone, her ship destroyed in battle, her name carved into the hearts of billions. But one evening, a strange signal arrived at Earth Command. Encrypted under an old Terran code, it was faint, damaged by radiation. But the voice was clear. "This is Alara Kane. We made it out, we are alive, the stars are listening." The officers who heard it stood in silence, tears in their eyes. They didn't know where she was or how she survived. But one thing was certain: humanity's story was not over. In the following months, the Union tried to restore control. They sent fleets to enforce their rule, but everywhere they went they found resistance. Entire worlds refused to obey, soldiers deserted their posts, and ambassadors demanded reform. The phrase human defiance became a rallying cry. The galaxy had awakened and there was no turning back. On Earth, the Terran Council gathered. Holograms of leaders and scientists filled the great chamber as they listened to the final fragments of the beacon. Ilara's voice played one last time. Soft but strong, "The stars abandoned them." But we did not. The council members stood, and one by one, they placed their hands over their hearts. From that moment, humanity was no longer just another member of the Union. They were something greater, a symbol of what the galaxy had forgotten. Soon, new alliances formed. Former enemies reached out to Earth, offering friendship and unity. Small fleets from different races joined together under a new banner, the Coalition of the Free Worlds. Their first vow was simple: no one will ever be left to die again. At its heart stood humanity, guiding but never ruling, leading not by fear, But by example across the galaxy, people spoke of the Resolute's light. Some called it a myth, others believed it was a miracle. But deep in the black void near the ruins of Varena's orbit, sensors occasionally detected a faint energy pulse. It was steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Engineers said it was interference, a leftover signal from the beacon. But to those who believed, it was something else. A reminder that somewhere out there, the spirit of the Resolute still burned. Rima, the little girl who once watched the sky for help, now stood as a young ambassador on New Dawn. She wore a small pendant shaped like a human star. When people asked her what humanity meant to her, she smiled and said, "They didn't come for power. They came because it was right." And whenever ships from new worlds arrived seeking peace, she would point to the stars and whisper, "That's where they came from." The ones who refused to look away. The galaxy had changed forever. The Union's golden towers no longer shone as bright, but in their place a new light rose, the light of unity, compassion and defiance. And in every corner of the universe, whenever someone faced despair, they remembered the story of a single human ship that stood against an empire. Because even after the flames faded and the wreckage turned to dust, the words of Captain Alara Kane lived on. We are humanity, and we stand with those the galaxy abandons. And somewhere, in the endless sea of stars, a voice whispered softly through the static, "The Resolute still flies."